happens. I mean, it happens to everybody.
Of course.
And especially,
All right, let's try to get started. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, we thank you that we can be here this evening. I ask, dear God, that your Holy Spirit will guide us, illuminate our minds and hearts, Father, guide our conversation, that everything will be for your glory. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. Before jumping into chapter 17, obviously, we're going to do some going through the basic outline. You have the outline? Yeah, there you go. I'm just going to go through basically what came before this, and some things I'm not going to get into unless you have a question. First things first is that when we talked about Revelation, remember that Revelation is composed of three genres, three different types of literature. It has the letters, which is the way it begins. It has apocalyptic literature, which is graphic imagery, the beast. These are apocalyptic, it's called apocalyptic imagery. And there was a type of literature in that time that was like that. And the third thing it is that it's prophetic. And this is the primary way that John sees himself. He is a prophet. He's someone who's been given a revelation from Christ through the Spirit to deliver to churches. Not only the churches in that time, but for all churches. Anytime you have a question, just jump right in. So that's the prologue where he has this. He's on the island of Patmos. He's been exiled there. Basically, they tried to kill John. John did not die. They exiled John. And he's on this island of Patmos, which is really not like a secluded area. There's still people there. But basically, when you're exiled, it means you have to go somewhere. And you can't come back until that emperor dies. Or that emperor. Once he dies, it's almost like all the decrees.
They wouldn't change their mind in the middle of anything.
Oh yeah, the emperor could change his mind, said you can come back, you're forgiven, whatever. But if not, you have to stay away from Rome, or away from where he tells you to stay away from until he passes away. Once he passes away, the next emperor, then unless he wants to continue with that, you can come back, and he does. He comes back eventually, and ends up pastoring, ministering in Ephesus, where he writes the three letters that we have, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and this is where he also passes away. We know from other literature, not biblical literature, extra biblical literature, that he was with that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was with him, and some of his brothers, Jesus' brothers, also spent time with him as well. But he was in Ephesus afterwards. And of course, in the prologue is where he sees the great revelation of Christ glorified. This just immense, he has to use imagery of, tongue like a sword, white hair, just to explain the glory of the Christ that encounters him. No longer the Jesus, just flesh and blood Christ. He is the glorified Christ. And the one thing, of course, that remains from him that identifies him as the physical Christ is the fact that he still bears the marks of the crucifixion on his body. Those he retains. But the rest of him is glorified. Then, of course, the Spirit gives him 7 letters to deliver to 7 churches in Asia Minor. And it actually goes, we went through the picture of how the churches are located. Actually, it is like a mailman's route. They had a way of delivering mail, and this is the way they would do it, and those churches fall right into that sequence. Then he is taken up in chapter 4, verse 1, to heaven. He has his awesome visions of God being glorified, of Christ being glorified. I have to take off my glasses. I can't read with glasses. This print's a little smaller. So God's sovereignty and judgment. We see the throne room vision, the God and Lamb in heaven, God in the throne, Christ the Lamb worthy to open the seals. There's a book, and there's no one worthy to open it until Christ comes forward. Then he removes the seal, and like I was trying to explain, the book is it would be like a scroll like this, and there was actual seals here. So even though the book has not even been opened, the seals, once they begin to be opened, are themselves apocalyptic things that occur, and then the book is opened, and then more is revealed of even greater things that are going to occur. So it's the first 6 seals, and then there's interludes that occur. We see the saints on earth and heaven. And of course, one of the things we learn early on is that the saints, of course, believers is what I mean by saints, are praying. The martyr saints are praying for vindication. God, how long? How long will evil prevail upon the earth? And God says, "Until your number is complete." And the book of Revelation and all the apocalyptic things that fall upon the wicked are a direct answer to the prayers of believers. So this is the response of God to wickedness because of what has occurred to his people. We see the saints being sealed. It means that they're being protected. So although, as you know, that I believe, I don't believe in that the church will be taken up. I believe that they will be here during tribulation. But the things that will affect the earth and affect the people will not affect believers. Just like the Israelites, when the plagues came upon Egypt, they affected the Egyptians, they affected people around them, but it did not affect the Israelites. They were protected by God's Spirit. And the same thing here. Then we see the great multitude in heaven, the seventh seal, 7 trumpets. Again, another form of judgment. And every time the judgment comes, as we notice, it's like first is like 1/3 of the earth, and half the earth, and the whole earth. So although some people have tried to see these as referring to the same thing, it's obvious that it's not. And I described it like a tsunami, where it's like it hits and it keeps on hitting, and the more it hits, the worse it gets. So by the time we get to the end of the book of Revelation, we're talking the whole earth is now being scorched, not simply 1/3 or half of it. So the introduction of the trumpets, first 4 trumpets, then the 5th trumpet, which is also called the first woe. The 6th trumpet, the interlude again, prophecy and witness. Also we're told about this little scroll, about the measuring a temple. We see this is talking about the people of God and people of God being protected again. And then we're told about the ministry, death, and resurrection of the 2 witnesses. Then there's the 7th trumpet. The great conflict then occurs in chapters 12 to 16 between God and the forces of evil. First we see the conflict between the dragon and God as well as his people. The woman and dragon becomes a way of retelling how the war begins as the enemy is trying to destroy Christ, but he's not able to. He's protected by God. Then there's war in heaven, which we know that Lucifer fell, Satan fell before the earth fell. Before Adam and Eve are tempted and fall, Lucifer falls first. And we're told that he takes 1/3 of the stars, which we saw symbolic for angels, with him. Then there's a war on earth. Then now he takes us right to the 2 beasts that rise up from the sea. And I'll try to remind you of these things as we go by, again, through these things. But again, the beast from the sea, the Antichrist, is definitely human, but he's definitely demonically possessed in some way. He's not simply a man. There is something else there. And again, remember that the dragon, the beast, and the prophet are trying in every way possible to imitate the Trinity. The dragon tries to present himself as God. The beast is supposed to be like Christ, so much so that he even gets injured, has an injury where it appears he dies, or maybe he does die, and then he's raised up, symbolic of Christ rising from the dead. And of course the beast, the false prophet, is symbolic of, again, the apostate church, the church against, that rebels against God and follows the beast. And this false prophet becomes like a preacher type. You know, he's a religious angle as opposed to the political angle, and trying to bring everybody together to worship the first beast.
I challenge your explanation there about the beast possibly dying.
Yeah.
Because as I see it, Satan can't give life.
Mm-hmm.
So if the beast dies, then that's saying like God brings him back to life.
Well, I said die or possibly die.
die.
Yeah, I'm not dogmatic either way.
Right.
I mean, it has the appearance
Of death.
of death.
Okay.
But although you're right, I can't think of one passage where it says Satan gives life. The same language that is used of signs and wonders is the same language that John uses in his gospel for Christ. The signs and wonders, the same Greek words. And it says that the beast will perform signs and wonders. So obviously the demonic has enough power to fabricate and look authentic. Even though you're right, they cannot give life ultimately. Only God can give life. But this is not the giving of life. This is like a bringing back. So it might be like a resuscitation. Again, he may not have been dead, but certainly they gave it the appearance that he definitely was dead. So that again, it looks like a miracle, and the dragon has interfered and brought him back to life. But you're right. I agree with that. I have nothing. I can't think of a verse that would say that the dragon has the power to generate life as God does.
That's why your choice of words, I was like, wait a second, I challenge that.
Yeah, well, they said appearance or might. Again, I don't think the text is so crystal clear that I can be dogmatic and go, aha. So, especially since I'm not in Paul, I'm not going to go, aha. Now I might change my mind because I'm like, I'm a student like everybody else. We see the song of the redeemed, the message of three angels, the harvest of the earth, the great conflict culminated. And you hear the introduction of the bowls, angels with final plagues, and the 7 last bowls, and that's where we left off before my injury.
The great conflict.
Before it looked like I had died, and no, I'm just kidding.
What was the great conflict? 15.
The great conflict culminated. It means that the final war between the army of God and the battle, the armies of the dragon, also sometimes called the armies of the beast, that will actually be gathering the nations, gathering the kings of the earth.
Oh, okay, I remember now.
To prepare themselves for battle, for the
Yeah.
great Armageddon battle against the people of God.
Yeah.
And that's when Christ himself will come and conclude that battle. Any questions?
Yeah, if it's supposed to last 7 years, the tribulation, right, to the day,
Mm-hmm.
once it starts, shouldn't they be able to figure out when Jesus will come back? If it's
No, because again, you have to remember a lot of things in the book of Revelation are very symbolic. And people have even questioned whether 7 years is literally 7 years, or that it's symbolic for completion. 7 is the number of completion, means that everything is finalized, everything is finished.
Okay.
So even that's been, all those things are, everything in the book of Revelation can be debated, trust me. It's like, and like I mentioned in the beginning, there are people who view the book of Revelation very differently, different interpretations. There are those who believe that this has already been fulfilled, this has already happened, it all occurred in the first century, blah, blah, blah. Those who believe that it has an application for the first century, but also for a future time, which is what I believe. And I kept pointing out, and I will keep pointing out, passages that just don't line up with first century. That's a good thing about studying. When you study and you know the first century, and then you see something in the book, and you're like, nothing like this ever occurred in the lifetime of John, or after John. We're talking 2,000 years, and these things have not been seen upon the earth. There are things that you can say, oh yeah, that things like this did happen in the first century, or they did happen there. But there are things that occur that have just never, ever been witnessed by anyone upon this earth. So I don't know how people, I mean, there are those who do hold to it all being fulfilled. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it, because I think there's so many red flags that keep coming up to say, no, this didn't. There's no sign of this being happening any time during that period. So but Revelation is like, oh yeah, anytime you ask about Revelation, you'll have different schools of thought, and there are 4 primary ways of viewing Revelation. So yeah.
So it doesn't mean necessarily 7 years then, that's good to know.
No, yeah, that's why. Otherwise, you're right that we were going to say, oh, here's when it starts. But then again, who would know when it starts?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not the real key factor is when the Antichrist arises, and he doesn't become pronounced until he declares himself to be God. So there might be a world leader who's bringing peace, unifying everything, and you can't tell, oh, this is the day when he started doing everything. You can only tell the day when he's finally unified the world, everything's at peace, and now he says, I'm gone. and you must worship me, or else.
And it's not going to be Donald Trump.
Well, you know, it's funny. I normally, thank God I don't hear nonsense like that anymore, because when I was young,
I heard a woman say
it would be like, you know, they would say like, you know, Reagan. I remember it was Ronald Wilson Reagan. 666. I was like, that's not what 666 means, but
Yeah. I was in the police station. Woman, she comes in every day to talk, and I think she has problems, and she says, "I think he's the Antichrist."
I was like, you know, so many people don't like him. I don't think so. If he's the Antichrist, people are going to love this guy.
Yeah.
This guy's going to bring world peace. This guy's going to be able to unify the world. He's going to be able to unify religions. This is not your ordinary politician. This guy is suave, magnified. Come on, this guy is great. So when you see somebody being able to unify not only nations, but even get religions to sit down and talk peace and unify as one religion, you got some heavy-duty person on your hands. But again, the idea of the Antichrist has been around since the very beginning of the church. I remember one of the first papers I wrote in Bible college was on the Antichrist, and I was just shocked that like how many every generation had its own belief that it's like this. Until the medieval times, during the medieval Reformation, they became fixated with the Pope and what they called the Black Pope.
Yeah.
And this was like a big thing, you
The
know.
Jesuit general.
And that's
running behind the scenes.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's still a belief today among a number of Protestants that there's a Black Pope. But we saw that in the Bible that there's two leaders.
Yeah. And he's not.
One is definitely political.
Right. He's not black and car. I think it means he's the Jesuit
Yeah,
general.
the dark guy.
Dark clothes, right?
No, the one really in charge. It's almost like here's the Pope, but here's a real Pope.
I always thought it because he didn't
Which
wear all that.
in Catholicism is not so difficult to believe. I mean, come on. You know, it's like you look at the Pope. It's just like right now we see the scandal going on the Pope. We realize how powerless he is, and who's running the show. Who's running the show? These cardinals seem to have a lot of power. So
The Jesuit general.
you can see why people will believe that there's somebody behind that would run the whole thing. But everybody's always picking on who they think the Pope is. I remember Gorbachev, because he had that little. I was like, people, come on, a little more study,
What would you call that?
a little less nonsense.
Is that like the wine stain?
Yeah.
They call it.
And they would say that was like the mark of the beast. I was
Yeah.
like, that's not what it's supposed to be. He's a little too obvious. So I think, come on.
Yeah.
You know, he is bringing peace. He actually brought peace, but let's not. Then he stepped
He took
down.
his shoe off in the UN, right, and handed it on the desk. That was Gorbachev, wasn't it?
No, that was Khrushchev.
Oh, that was Khrushchev.
That's
Oh.
a chef.
Yeah.
Well, didn't somebody take off a shoe and throw
Yeah.
it at somebody?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know about throwing it, but yeah. But I remember
Yeah,
the.
Japan and, yeah.
Yeah, that was
Wasn't it
Khrushchev.
Oh, that was
recently?
Khrushchev.
Like a couple of years ago or something?
That's possible.
Oh, it was George Bush. Yeah, somebody took their shoe off, threw it at George Bush. The kid, not his father, but
I didn't know.
I saw it.
Was
in
that
news.
here or was that in the UK? Because that.
I don't remember where it was, but I saw that they took off the shoe. They threw it
Yeah,
at George Bush.
That was in
in some
the-
cultures
in the-
still it's a way of showing insult and
Yeah, it was
Middle
throw
East,
someone's
right?
shoe, yeah.
Middle East was it?
in the UK.
Somewhere. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's still a custom in
Yeah.
certain places. Any other questions? All right, let's jump into Revelation chapter 17. And we're going to cut it down in certain sections so we can get through it all. Everybody there? Revelation 17? Rose, would you read verses 1 through 6, or 6a actually, if you can, because I know 6 has, just 1 through 6. Sorry.
The
One-
woman on the beast. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute, who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." When the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert, then, the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The women The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes, and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus.
Okay. You can stop there, actually. That's what I meant by 6a. Because actually, that second portion then goes into the next part. Any questions? Well, simple enough. We can just keep going now. No questions there? All right. Now, one of the imageries that John is using, and of course I think this is why people get lost in the idea that it's something just pertaining to the first century, is that the Spirit of God, of course, is going to show things to John in a way that will be relevant to him, and make sense to him, and make sense to the first audience that receives his message. So a lot of the imagery here, you'll see that has similarities to the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is seen as an empire of the Antichrist, as an evil empire, and especially it's an oppression of Christians. But again, it becomes an image, not the final version. It's almost like, and there are many cases like that in the book of in the Bible. When you get to the book of Daniel, you'll see things where, when it describes certain things, it's you're actually using an emperor that is already known at that time, who already had done things that were sacrilegious and horrible. And so these images, once they're there, you can use them. Like if I wanted to communicate something horrific, and I used Fidel Castro as my prototype, people would understand the imagery, that it's my culture, it's my people, it's understandable why I would use this imagery to portray the Antichrist. But not that I'm saying that he was the Antichrist, but he wasn't Antichrist. He was definitely a precursor, someone before the great and final one. And even John speaks that way. When he says in one of his letters, he says, in 1 John, he says, there are many Antichrists. Many Antichrists have gone into the world. So there have been many Antichrists, but then there will be the Antichrist, this one individual at the end. So Rome becomes a model of this picture of the great prostitute of Babylon, of this this empire that is set against God and set against the people of God. And of course, in chapter 18, we'll see the destruction of that city. In verses 1 and 2, you see the close tie between chapter 16 and 17, because one of the angels, the angel who invites John to see a judgment of the great prostitute, is one of the angels who had the 7 bowls. So this is leading right into from the 7th bowl right into the final battle, the final chapter in the history of the world. Thus the judgment of 17 to 19 is seen as the extension of the bowl judgments, partly intended as an elaboration of the last 2 bowls that led to the destruction of Babylon the Great. Here the angel promises to show John the judgment of the great prostitute. She is great because she is Babylon the Great, a symbol for Rome and the empire of the beast. Prostitution, the word porne, is a picture of immorality. But as we've seen in the book of Revelation, it doesn't simply refer to sexual immorality physically, also spiritually. It's been, throughout the whole book, it's been signed that it's not simply, oh my goodness, they're indulging in something that is sexual and against the moral dictates of God. Anything that goes against God, where you're cheating on God, is seen as porne, as adultery. That's why in the Old Testament you'll see that Israel is judged as being a harlot, as being a prostitute, because you had a husband, you were with the Lord, you were with him, and then you went off and did these things. Well, here there's not only simply an economic, political disobedience or moral disobedience, there's also spiritual disobedience. And so we have to keep that in mind. So it's something that is very common. Like I said, Israel is said to have the spirit of a prostitute, and of course Ezekiel is very, very definitive about that. And there was a book that I mentioned, I think I didn't write that this time. There's a great book on this whole topic of spiritual adultery, which is really worth the reading. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Maybe I'll bring it next time, because really I read that book and I was like, wow, this is incredible, because it talks about the whole imagery of God and In the Old Testament, of course, being married to Israel, and in the New Testament being married to the church, and talks about the importance of fidelity to God. And when you're not faithful to God, the language that is used is that of an adulteress, is that of someone who's being cheating on her husband. So it's a very powerful image, and we find in the Old Testament. But it's also seen, of course, other nations. When other nations do such things, they're also called prostitutes. For example, when Nineveh does it, when Tyre does it, they're called prostitutes because, again, there's only one God. And he's not only the God of Israel, he's the God of the world. He's everybody's God. And if you have other gods, then you're cheating on God. So very powerful.
Now, this only applies to Christians, because for a non-Christian, this is like irrelevant.
No,
For
no,
a
no, no.
non-Christian, they're not thinking about God.
Well, no, but it's still seen, again, that's why I mentioned Nineveh and Tyre. In the Old Testament, you still have imagery of the nations going against God, and the language is still used of prostitution, because there's only one God. He's the God of all. Like
Yeah,
if you
but
read
it's the
Isaiah,
nation.
you see Isaiah calling judgment on the nations. Because again, although they don't have the full revelation of God through the law, where God speaks, they still had the law. They still had the revelation of God through nature, through their conscience. They knew that these things were wrong. These things were sinful, and they followed after them anyhow. So they're still called to repent as well. Any nation that does not acknowledge God and worships other gods is committing adultery, because Satan didn't create them. Nobody else created them. God created them. And although they don't have they were not like Israel, they still had the light of God, and they still had to respond to God. And here, of course, the imagery is twofold. It's not simply committing adultery, but what this prostitute does is not simply that she commits adultery. She also promotes it. She's also trying to get others to indulge in it. And this was seen, of course, in Rome. That not only are you playing the harlot, you're trying to get other nations to be like you and to play the harlot as well. And this is why there's the double condemnation. It's not only bad enough you're doing it, but you're trying to entice other people to go and do it as well, and to fall into the same sinfulness that you're involved in. Any question? The many waters that are talked about here are defined in chapter 17, verse 15 as peoples and multitudes, nations, and tongues, referring to many nations under the control of Babylon/Rome. To sit upon a nation means to conquer it, to control it, and that was a very common imagery. And you also you had the imagery that when you talked about stepping on someone's head was actually done literally. You would see a king, after he defeated another king, stepping on his head, and it was symbolic of being defeated. I own you and I own your people. And here's the imagery of sitting upon, means I rule over you, I've conquered you. And so this imagery is there as well. The rulers have led the nations.
Wait, I have a question.
Sure.
Does the water have any kind of symbolism? Because I know normally water means life, and water was the kind of like one of the main economic sources for Rome.
Yes, that's
But
true.
does that imagery play in at all here or no?
Well,
I know it comes in later in like 18 and so forth.
Mhm. But when it comes in later,
Mirror
it's
is
actually
like
seen more as an imagery of evil, not as an imagery of life. And the symbolic imagery behind it is John has in mind. John is heavily influenced by the prophets. If you want to comprehend John fully, studying Ezekiel, Isaiah, all these prophets, and you see that in Isaiah, for example, the Leviathan, the creatures that move in the water, causing chaos. Remember in the book of Genesis, it says that God creates, but then the earth, the waters have tohu and bohu, empty and void. There's a chaos going on in the waters, and Spirit hovers above the waters, and He brings order out of this chaos. In the ancient world, one of the views was that not only that the waters were chaotic, which of course we know they are. We've seen the turbulence of water. We know how dangerous waters can be. We were just talking about going to waters and worrying about sharks, but it was more than that. There were so many things in the waters that are dangerous, and the ancient world saw the waters as deadly, dangerous. And so sometimes it was a picture of that primordial chaos that occurred. And one of the pictures of God is that in the book of Isaiah, which I remember when my professor first pointed it out to me, I had to go check it out. It was so true that all these creatures, Leviathan, Behemoth, all these primordial evils that are in the chaotic waters, God says they're my toys. They're like tug toys for me. And I always think of my daughter now when I see her bathing. I see her playing with the toys. I think they're like nothing for God. They're like, people were so afraid of these things, and they saw gods everywhere. Oh, the God of this God, and they were fearful. And here's God saying, "They're nothing. I play with them. They're completely under my control." John has this imagery of this immense evil. That's why people say in the book of Revelation, when we come toward the end, they'll say that there is no sea in the future Jerusalem. In the world, there'll be no sea. And it's like, oh God, it's water.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's thinking H2O. Is something wrong with H2O? Absolutely not, because evil is being portrayed here in those chaotic waters. So of course, the fact that there is no sea at the end of the book of Revelation means that there is no evil. Evil has been conquered. It has been stopped. That's all it means. But again, if we don't comprehend the prophets, and I'm not saying I do, because I'm just probably, I know a little bit more than other people, but I'm not an Old Testament scholar. But when you get to know the prophets better, you understand John better. This is his world. This is the world that, like all those Daniel, if you knew these guys better, you'd be reading this going, oh yeah. And so these are the chaotic waters. And here the chaotic waters are the very people that Babylon is ruling over. She rules over us. Well, this is her chaos, her things. But very powerful image. But yeah, water here is not, I'm trying to think of one passage in Revelation where water is portrayed as life. Because you're right, there are places where water is life. And that makes sense also in the ancient world. It's this thing that you're fearful of, but it's also a thing that sustains you. And you need it, just like you need bread.
What's the river flowing down the center? Does that have anything to do with it? The river of life or something? Right? Isn't there in the center
That's right.
a waterfall? Or
Yeah, that's right. There's no sea, but there is the
the water.
which is symbolic, of course, of the Garden of Eden. Because when we come to that passage, you'll see that it's a beautiful imagery. The imagery really is. That's why there's no temple either, because. And again, I know I keep telling you, read. I can't help it. John Walton has two fantastic books: The Lost World of Genesis 1 and 2, and The Lost World of Adam and Eve. Phenomenal. And he goes to show how in the book of Genesis, where God is creating all these things, what God is creating is a temple. People don't see that. People say, oh, why can't we see that? Because we're in the 21st century. If we were 3,000 years before Christ, this is what they understood. Because this is not something that was just peculiar to Israel. The nations had the same imagery, that the God would create a place where he would abide, and then he would come and abide in it. And God makes humans as representatives of himself within the temple. But when he rests, it doesn't mean that he takes a nap. It means that he's coming to his temple to rule, to finally abide. This is the beautiful imagery. Now, that imagery is throughout the whole Bible. And G.K. Beale wrote a great book on the temple, where he talks about, you see this imagery throughout the whole Old Testament, New Testament. When you come to Revelation, you see it also. There is no temple. Why? Because the whole earth is full of the glory of God. Jerusalem is seen as the Holy of Holies, where the presence of God emanates then to the rest of creation. And it's a renewal of what God was trying to do in the Garden of Eden. He was creating a place where there was no evil and where he would come to abide and rule. It all failed. It all fell apart. In Christ, this is all being resumed, to be redone, so that the whole earth, again, will be full of the glory of God, as it was intended. So the new creation is really a fulfillment of the first creation, as what it should have been. Beautiful imagery. And we'll see that when we get to garden imagery in I think it's chapter 20 or 21. Any questions?
There's not necessarily a river flowing down.
No, not literally.
Okay.
Yeah. This is all imagery.
Oh, okay.
This is all conveying pictures. Just like there's no city, there's no streets of gold. This is imagery.
Oh, okay.
This is to define what the New Jerusalem is all about, what it's all about. And And again, as one commentator said, the streets being of gold is letting us know that what is so precious down here is like nothing up there. It's like things you walk on. It's like, gold is not seen as like, oh, it's like I walk on it all day. It's like, but again, it goes to show the greatness of God.
Good point.
And the majesty of God. But again, the whole imagery by the time we get to the book of Revelation, we'll see that the imagery is that Jerusalem is the Holy of Holies, and the presence of God goes out through all the earth, everywhere. Which was just 4 rivers of the garden was supposed to go throughout all
The
the
Jews want to
earth.
make that their capital now, right?
Hmm?
The Jews want to make Jerusalem their capital, right?
They can do whatever they want to.
I mean, you heard that, right?
No, haven't heard that.
You didn't?
No. But Jerusalem is important to God, and that land is important to God, and of course it's the land where His Son died, and where His Son rose. But there is something symbolically important to God in that land, because I always tell people, I was very fascinated when I was studying the Old Testament, and I came to that character Melchizedek. And I thought, what a fascinating character, which again becomes symbolic of Christ. But he's king of Salem. Salem is Jerusalem. It's the ancient city of Jerusalem, by its first name, Salem. That was the name of Jerusalem before David gave it the name Jerusalem. And God is already working there, and He already had a priest there, even before David and the Israelites come into that. So there's something very unique about that place. I'll have to ask God all the details when I get to see Him. But there's something definite about that place that from all the way to Genesis, even before the Israelites, even before David, because we think, oh, David. No. This is before him. This is an obscure guy who comes in one chapter to talk to Abraham, blesses Abraham. It proves, and as the book of Hebrews says, proves that he's greater than Abraham because he's the one blessing Abraham. And the greater is always the one who blesses, not the one who receives the blessing. And he instructs Abraham about God, because he actually tells Abraham that he serves El Elyon, the God Most High. Abraham doesn't know that name for God. And you see that shortly thereafter, when he's referring to God, he calls him El Elyon. He didn't know this about the revelation of God. And Melchizedek shows him this. And this is brought out a great deal in the book of Hebrews, where we're told about more things about them. But, again, Melchizedek is one of these very obscure people. Comes in, goes out. Then suddenly there's a reference to him in Psalm 100, verse 4. You will be a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Say, what? Where does that come from? Psalm 100, which is the most quoted psalm. The most quoted Old Testament passage in the New Testament is Psalm 100. Because all those verses have meaning. If you go to Psalm 100, it's not like 4 verses. Verse 4 is, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And it's like this odd verse coming out of nowhere, put into a psalm, which really has, who's Melchizedek and why is he important? Then we meet Jesus, and now he makes sense. Because in the Hebrew culture, a king could not be a priest. A priest could not be a king. The kings were from Judah, the priests were from Levi. There was never one person that ever served across the aisle, or could serve both things. You always had the king, you always had the priest. Melchizedek is both. He's a king, and he's a priest. Christ is a priest after the order of Melchizedek, because he is king, he's from Judah, and he's also a priest. He actually fulfills this prophecy, which looks weird and obscure out of nowhere, one verse. Again, the only place where Melchizedek is mentioned is Genesis, Psalm 100, and then when we get to the book of Hebrews, where the author of Hebrews explains to us who this guy is and what he's done for us, and how he relates to Christ. Any questions? Now I've taken you on the whole journey. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Verses 3 to 6. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. In Scripture, the desert can be viewed in either a positive or a negative light. It can be seen as positive as a place of comfort and revelation. Elijah goes into a desert. God is there. God ministers to him. The woman, when in Revelation 12, when the woman is escaping the dragon, she's led into the wilderness, where she is taken care of and provided by God. But it's also seen as a place that is negative, not always positive. It's a place of testing and devastation. Christ is led into the wilderness, and he is tested for 40 days and 40 nights. It's also seen in the Bible, it's also seen and understood to be the place where the demonic have power. And obviously when Christ goes to be tempted, the demonic has power to now test him, to try to hurt him, to try to stop him. And it's a very common imagery of that. So it can go both ways. So he's led into a wilderness to see this woman, again, this evil, this embodiment of evil, and this empire. And as John arrives at the desert, he sees a woman sit in a scarlet beast. This woman is certainly the great prostitute, and she sits on the beast, could hit some kind of control. She's the one who's, this evil is the one controlling the empire. Again, no empire works by itself. You know, and this is something that I didn't get into much. You know, we don't think about it much, and certainly because we're 21st century Americans, and we normally go for naturalistic things. But when I read the book of Daniel, and I realized that there could be demonic spirits working within nations, I realized, we should take more account of that. When you see a nation that is evil, that is committing atrocities, to realize that it's just not the men and women running the country, but that there's an evil behind them, inspiring them to do their horrible, especially when we see it against believers. You know, as I see China now refocusing its energies to harm Christians, I don't see it simply as, oh, the president of China is doing this. No, there's something demonic going on there and pushing its way to do this. And this is what it is. There's something demonically influencing this great empire. It's not simply, again, just like the beast. He's not working by himself. He's just not a man. He's inspired demonically to do the things he does. So is this nation, this evil. This last empire, of course, and Rome becomes a picture of it. Babylon is a picture of it. And we see again that this is someone who is definitely royal, somebody who's definitely controlling royalty, controlling power, because when you see scarlet, scarlet was a sign of a kingship.
Can we go back before you get to like the scarlet and the jewels and stuff like that?
Yeah.
As far as the she, right? This is not a woman, right? There's some kind of
No, a symbol.
a symbol.
yeah. It's a symbol, but it's not a woman.
And I'm wondering, because when I was reading the commentary, I didn't find anything that really helped explain that.
Yeah, I couldn't even agree. I have it in my notes, but I was skipping over. I was going to let you guys read it when you get the notes, because I just put it there to have it, but I could not be convinced, because Osborne in his commentary sees the beast as the political order,
Yeah.
and the woman as the religious order. But I'm not convinced of that. And again, the imagery is so...
What about the system, the world system?
Yeah, but even so, I see the woman as that which is inspiring and moving in. I'd be more convinced of her demonic influence, and her being a symbol of the demonic influence than of an actual of the religious system. Because again, I saw the religious system. I saw more like the first beast being political, the second beast being religious. And again, preaching, proclaiming the first beast and saying worship the first beast. what you would expect a prophet to do. But I don't see that the spiritual having control of the beast, unless it's demonic, and we said demonic is controlling that empire. That would make sense to me. But again, the woman is just to me a symbol. Yeah, I was not convinced by that comment. I've not been convinced by one particular commentator.
Because I was like, why even say? Because I think like the words chosen are important as well. Like I don't think it's just a coincidence that he like John chooses to say a woman or versus a man.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I think of it, women are very influential
Mm-hmm.
to both men and women. Like you take mother of prostitutes. Like see, I think about the word and the meaning behind the word and thinking about what I don't know. I guess the possibilities are, for lack of a better word. Like you see a mother as far as someone who kind of molds and shapes, let's say, their child or something like that. And if you compare that to a father, their role in a child's life is very different from the role of a mother. They're both still parents, but kind of like they govern and instruct very differently. So I was just wondering, like after I read it, I was like, I couldn't find anything to say like, well, why do they believe this woman for ABC reasons or vice versa? So I was like, who better to ask than you?
No, if we were studying Paul, there'd be nobody better to ask than me. Not John. Like I said, and especially this kind of imagery. Now, first of all, I don't believe that, to me, John is seeing this. I don't believe that he's creating the image of a woman.
I know, but
I
even
believe
to
he's
show
seeing
him that.
And
still.
then, but again, it's imagery that will convey things to him that will make sense to him, but he's seeing it, and then he's being told what it is. And you're right, the imagery comes in as in the motherly sense, as that which procreates.
Right.
Because again, it's procreating its own evil. It's spreading its own evil. It's not simply an evil that it stays by itself, but it's actually moving out into the world. But who the woman is, it's not a person. It's an imagery. Just like the beast. We know the beast is not really a beast.
Yeah.
It's not really an animal. That it's a person. But yet the imagery is that, again, coming out of the waters, the chaotic waters, the evil. But again, I don't know why the woman would be a woman. And why, I don't. If I did, I would tell you.
And
Or if I even had a clue, or if I had read and said, oh my goodness, I see some good explanations that would make sense of this. But I don't. So when I don't really understand something, I let it be until someone come around and say to me that says, okay, that makes a little sense.
Because I printed my thing today, and someone like was helping me with the machine, and he saw my notes, and he was like, oh, you're Christian, da 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 da. And he was like, well, what's this? I was like, well, it was my lesson plan, but now I'm going to class and someone else is going to teach it. And like he started thinking, he was like, oh, this is from a woman's perspective. And I was just like, what woman, what perspective? Like, what are you talking about? And he just kind of went on, and I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm so pressed for time. But I was like, this is like a 2-year plus conversation. I'm like, where are you getting, that it's a woman talking and this is from her perspective? I'm like, you think this is from my perspective because I'm the woman and this is my lesson plan? He was like, no, but it's the prostitute and this. I was like, it's not a physical prostitute. It's not a literal woman. This book is all imagery. He was like, well, what do you mean imagery? I was like, Lord, have mercy. I'm going to pray for this man. I was like, we're going to talk. We're going to meet, a few days during lunch, and I'm going to try to explain to you what I can explain to you. I was like, but in the meantime, if your church have Bible study, you should go.
But I don't see how you would see this as a perspective of a woman.
I mean,
unless a woman who hated women. Because why would a woman portray women as a prostitute and a whore riding upon a beast?
Because he's reading it literal.
Yeah, exactly. But what woman would do that? I mean, for example, sometimes I joked around because I remember when I went to a very liberal seminary. And, I shouldn't have done anything. I repent now, but it's too late. Because I went to a very conservative Bible college, and I already had my Greek, my Hebrew, I had all my foundations. And then I saw seminary, I was like, I have to repeat this. But when I went to apply to seminary, it was like, repeat what I did in Bible college? This is insane. This is wrong. So I said, let me go to the opposite. Let me just go to liberal. So one of the things they always do is that they always talked about God. They never used the pronoun he. The divine one, or even she. So I got even with them. Because I'd be talking about, and the devil, and she did this, and she, why are you agree? They would get angry with me, and I'm like, well, we shouldn't use a gender for devil either. That's not fair. And they were like, and I was like, you idiots. I'm actually making fun of you. But it's true, if I was going to portray a devil, right, I'd be like, a devil, she did this, and she did that. Then I'd be like, oh my goodness, So I wouldn't see how a woman would portray evil, the epitome of evil, as a woman. Or being manipulative, whatever. I just think this is what John is seeing, and the imagery makes sense to him and his culture. And but again, God is not a sexist in that sense either, because when you look at the Bible, you see that the dragon is masculine, not feminine. The beasts are masculine, not feminine. So there's no like, oh, he's just picking on women at this point. This is just the imagery that helps John to understand. And I think it is because of what you're saying, that it is connected with the idea of prostitution. It is connected with of a mother. Not only someone who's a prostitute, but again, the mother of prostitutes. Someone who not simply was evil, but then generated that evil to other people and spreading her evil in that sense. And I think female imagery does work well that way. It's as a procreation. Promoting
Is
itself.
the beast in English masculine?
Yeah, the beast is masculine.
Spanish.
And actually in
Spanish
well, I
is
mean,
not.
no, when you read the Greek, when you're reading Revelation, it says he. He did this, he did that. Just like the false prophet, it's a he. And he makes him
Spanish
do
is feminine.
Oh, you mean the...
La bestia?
Oh, it's
Spanish is feminine.
Oh, there you go, you see. Well, yeah, words, beast. I'll look that up. It's a good question. If the actual noun itself is masculine or feminine, I'll look that up. That I'm not sure about. But I meant the beast is masculine in the sense that it's a he. Not in the sense that you're right, like ship, whatever, we have a tendency to call things by male or female terms. But I'll look up beast for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why female. It's a good question. Very good question. I haven't found a satisfactory answer yet. If I ever do.
Well, a woman can get a lot of people to do things that a man won't. A woman can, because a guy wants a woman. She can get two men fighting. Oh, you know what I mean? She has a lot of influence. Everybody wants a woman.
But when you look at the world, the dominance has been men. The rulers of the world have been men. The ones who have gotten people to do what they want have been tyrants, and they have been men. I can't think of one tyrant.
In all fairness.
Was there ever a woman tyrant? I don't think there was ever a
No.
woman who ever ruled as
But
tyrant.
we've had rulers who you learn that it's the wife really driving the ship, they're the face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
That's happened.
Yeah,
Yeah. You've had rulers who they are the
true.
face that you see,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, I don't want to say puppet, because that's not the right word, but the driving force behind them,
Mhm.
the influencer has
Is the
been the
woman.
woman.
yeah.
I can see certain kingdoms like that.
You've had,
I still think of the most vicious kingdoms I can think of, and I can't see a woman. I can't see a woman behind Hitler. She was Hitler. Castro.
they're special cases.
Nero. I'm thinking the first century Nero, who was like, whew, he was out there. Caligula. Oh, these guys are. There was no woman behind. These guys are nuts. And these guys are really the dominating force.
Mussolini, same way.
Mussolini, Attila. We can go on here. I can't think of women really. I can see how women have been influential and controlling things, and certainly they had power, and we see that in the Old Testament as well. When I think of Solomon, I always think of his mother Bathsheba. She became so powerful that an actual throne is put next to his throne, which has never been heard of in the kingdom of Israel. Here's suddenly she's really ruling with him as well. She has become a mother in Israel in a very literal sense. But Jezebel, but she's not. Who's really the one? Although she's married to Ahab, she's the one who's really ruling. and she's really in control. But at that point, we see Ahab as a very weak man, not strong at all, who can be manipulated. So very, very different. But again, interesting. It's imagery, and I just haven't found a satisfactory answer yet. Maybe we will in our journey. Any other questions?
Yeah, just one. When you talk about the desert, is because I find them beautiful. Are they the result of the curse, by any chance?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
'Cause I love deserts, and
Yeah.
I'd like to, in eternity, be somewhere in a country where there are deserts. But
Certainly, there's a chaos that comes to creation because of the fall. I don't know if desert would be
because
one of
actually
those.
it's barren, it's nothing,
Mhm.
you know. But it's a beautiful place to me.
But yeah, like I said, but in the Bible, it's not seen as always negative. Only negative when it's like place of temptation, a place of trial. But it's also a place of comfort, a place where people go and they encounter God, and God is there to take care of them and help them.
Serenity.
So, like I said, Elijah's a good example of that, where he goes into the wilderness. He wants to end his life. And God is the one who comes and comforts him and speaks to him. So the imagery goes both ways.
Wasn't John the Baptist in the desert
Yes.
for a while?
He was in the wilderness as well. Yeah. Again, these are where God reveals Himself to John is there and tells him what to do. So
Moses.
yeah.
Maybe it's
Moses.
just a place where you go and it's peaceful.
Mhm.
Because the desert, well, I mean, we think we're so familiar with, you say desert and the imagery comes to mind, but like to think about it, as opposed to the city, it's quiet,
Mhm.
you know. So
You know, because the deserts of California, you got those huge mountainous rocks far in the distance, and then
Mhm.
everything's just wide open. I don't know. I
no
guess-
cars honking, none of that.
Yeah,
You
I
have time
just thought it
to
was
think and
beautiful.
meditate.
Well, I'm glad you. Well, I don't see it that way. But
Keep it at 120 degrees.
I think of death. I think I'm
120.
finished. If I can barely survive in the city, I'm
I
going to
was
die in the
in
desert.
Mexico, I know.
I'm going to survive out there. Every time I see a desert, I see a poor human being then completely lost. Because there's no way of knowing direction. It's not like that building's over there and this building's over here.
Oh, yeah, you
And you can
get
get so lost, and you burn up and you die. Or like one moment, there's a day that everything's so hot, and at night everything's so cold.
Yeah.
I'm like,
You're letting your imagery get out of control.
no, man. I'm thinking about the movies and stuff I've seen. I'm like, I've
You're
never
right
seen.
about that hot and cold
I've never seen the
stuff.
desert as being like a homey type place.
No, you're right about that.
you know,
hot and
That's
cold.
true, yeah.
I've seen it as a very vicious place. I mean, I'm not even a country person.
They say in the nighttime it gets real cold.
Very
sometimes.
cold. You didn't want to get out of your
Yeah,
sleeping bag to
yeah,
go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's how cold it got.
Yeah, I was. When I went out out in the country, I'm not very fond of that either. I was never fond of being in one place where I can stand and literally I can't see my hand. I'm like, I need to get somewhere where I need to see my hand. This is not fun. I had a friend invite me out to where she was from. It was in Pennsylvania. It was very dark, beautiful. The stars are gorgeous.
Yeah.
But there was a point where I was like, we shouldn't be out here. Animals are out here.
They can see you.
They can see me. I can't see them. I can't even see my hand. We need to be out of here. Or even when I was went to a friend of mine in college, she would take me out to her farm. And everything was fine until she starts talking about, when we get back, let me make sure you have no lice or this, little things in your head. I'm like, you took me out here knowing these things were out here, and now we have to check me when I get back in. I don't like this. Not fun for me. No, I'm definitely a city mouse, not a country mouse. I'm like, no, this is fine with me. I like it. I like knowing that my little stores over there where I can get a bagel and everybody's different. But yeah, even the country's difficult for me, so I can't imagine the desert. But again, the desert in the Bible is both things. It has both images.
Because normally it's considered a negative thing.
I would think so. Unless you're a part of it, unless it's part of your culture, part of your roots, to have that. The quiet is good, but I think you don't have to go that far to have quiet and serenity. But it's funny when speaking of that, I'll tell you a little history as well. In the 4th century, that became a very popular place, the desert, because what happened was Christianity became legalized under Theodosius II in 380 A.D. He I shouldn't say legalized it. Constantine legalized Christianity. It was an outlaw religion until then. Christians were being persecuted. And Constantine made it a legal religion, but people still practice paganism. Theodosius in 380 made it the religion of the empire. And what started happening is you had all these pagans now, although they worshipped other gods and everything, still going to church because they didn't want to get killed and they didn't want to get persecuted. It was funny, the whole thing turns around so quickly. But there were people like Anthony. We talk about St. Anthony. There was a real Anthony. He was a very devout Christian, and he decided that he was going to go into the desert because Christianity had become polluted. Had become paganized. It's like everybody's a Christian now, and there's no real Christianity. So he goes into the desert to encounter God, and he writes about his experiences. One of the things I find fascinating about him that he said that he was trying to get away from the paganism of the city, only to find that paganism was in his very bones, that he himself had sin within him. So that even though he went to the desert, he still had to battle sin. He was thinking, I'm getting away from all his city stuff so I can get away from sin and not battle it. It's like, oh no, it's in me. I still have to battle it. And he became a model for the monastic movement, where people would actually go into monasteries. But it started with the desert experience. And there's a whole literature of that during that era because Christianity had become paganized because of this influx of pagans coming into the church.
Yeah, because then they're not really taking it seriously. They're just there, so like they don't get
Exactly,
persecuted.
which is what brought in paganism into the church by that, because people were taking their superstition, their stuff, and basically baptizing it as Christian and continuing with which happens in any culture. When a person comes to know the Lord, they bring that culture with them, and some of that culture is pagan, and it's bad, and they have to learn that, hey, wait a minute, you can come in, but that has to go. That's not Christian. That's not a proper behavior. And everybody's in church now. So Christians who wanted to devout actually left this whole system to go out to the desert. So there's a little story.
I still see, I don't know, I find it odd, but I still see Christians, like, you having conversation with them and you say, like, heaven forbid something, and they do the sign of the cross, and I'm like, what are you doing? What's happening here? What's going on? Why are you doing that? They're like, oh, I'm crossing myself. I'm like, why? Why are you doing that? Like, but then they're coming from a Catholic background, and you're like,
You see it in football when they score a touchdown, right? They got
some
at least
people
one
don't
that sort.
like-
Yeah. Most of them do this.
Yeah, you wonder if it's. I don't know about the sign of the cross. It might have been to ward off evil or something like that. Because I've noticed also Catholics do it for some reason. Also, when you have which I thought was very easy, like you see an ambulance pass by, and I'll see somebody go like this. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
Well, isn't it
I don't know
false?
why they do that.
If I
Maybe
remember
because they are
correctly,
praying. Sort of
No, well, no, but see, the thing is that they may do it because now it's just part of the culture.
well,
For example, I'll give you an example. When people sneeze,
Yeah.
you say, God bless you.
yeah.
That's because in the medieval world, they believed that when you sneeze,
the
an evil
evil-
spirit was coming out of you. And so they would say, God bless you.
Oh, la, la.
So we have continued this tradition, even though we don't know anymore where that ritual came from. That's why, for example, if you sneeze in front of me, you'll notice I don't say, God bless you. I say, bless you.
I always said
I
blush.
purposely removed the God.
We say Jesus.
Because I know what it's connected to. But this is just a superstitious thing that happened, and now it's just part of our culture. We don't even think about it anymore. So that may have been something to ward off evil or something like that. Like I know where the saints came from. I told you a study about how the saints came into belief, like, oh, like Anthony. Oh, Anthony, help me to find something that's lost. Well, that came in because there was a paganism there. And in the pagan world, people were praying to their gods and to their things. For example, they would say, like, I'll give you the one I know. You were going to go off into battle or face a difficulty, a struggle. You would say, oh, Emperor Victorious. General Victorious, you who led the great armies of Rome and did this, please be with me and strengthen me and help me as I go through this struggle. And the bishops were like, how do we stop them from doing this? They won't stop. So well, let's replace these things with these things. So instead of talking to General Victorious, why don't you ask Anthony to help you? Why don't you ask Mary to help you? Why don't you ask Joseph to help you? And that's how I came in. And now we just take it for granted, the cult, what we call the cult of the saints. But it came in because of this superstition, because of this pagan thing. So I don't know about the cross. The cross may also have a symbolic.
If I remember
I'm gonna look it up.
correctly, in Catholic school, they said it was like that's how you dial. You know, like a phone, you dial, and the Father, Son, and Holy
my
Spirit. Then yeah,
Mhm.
if my memory correct, it was like. Then again, you know, they're explaining this to first graders. Then I don't think you're
So
saying
you're calling
dial.
God?
That's how, if I remember correct, it's saying
You're
it's like
calling-
dialing. When you're dialing, you know. But then again, these people are a little strange anyway. I was a Catholic until I started reading the Bible. So,
Mhm.
you know.
Well, now that's interesting you said that, because the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, do it the other way. The Catholic, the Roman Catholic, cross themselves like this.
Hmm.
The Eastern Orthodox cross themselves like this.
Mm.
So they do it on the other side. So I don't know. There might be a connection between those two. But obviously, again, something is there. I'll find it. It's just not one of my intrigues, because it's not like necessarily Bible. But I'll look into it. I'm sure there's got to be a reason why they cross
Yeah,
themselves.
I just found it.
But
Oh,
again,
that
whatever it
nice.
was back then, that's not the reason they do it now.
Isn't it the?
But it's something that stays within our system.
We were told to sign of the cross, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost.
Yeah, of course. But how did it originate?
Yeah.
Because you never read in the Bible, oh,
Yeah.
Paul crossed himself.
Yeah.
You never see anywhere in the Bible where it says anybody in the Bible crossed themselves.
That's right, yeah.
You know, so it came in somewhere for some reason, and then it became part of the culture. And now, although we don't no longer know maybe the origin of it and the original meaning,
It's there.
it's just now done out of ritual. But we no longer know why. You know, but like I told you, I can tell you why people say God bless you, where it started, and I can tell you why they worship the saints, where it started. So the cross, I'm sure, has some sort of meaning like that too. But haven't found that one. We'll have to look into it. You do a lot of reading, Rose. You might. You come across it, let us know.
Well, I saw people in front of the statues they have in their yards. One guy many years ago, he was walking past, he stopped, he looked at it, and I don't
Yeah.
know, then,
But again, it's a ritual. The question is
I might
where,
have even done it myself.
where that ritual comes from. No, I've never done anything like that. But then again, I was raised nominally Catholic. So I don't remember crossing myself. So, but I remember seeing people doing it. I just never did it. So I was never a devout Catholic. I was a nominal Catholic. My mom believed in all this stuff, but not really. We didn't go to church. We didn't, it was just like her superstition. And I got some of that superstition, but I never saw her crossing herself either. So,
In a way, could you call this stuff holy witchcraft, like the way the medals and stuff, they think it's going to protect you? Could it be along the line, there's a holy witchcraft? I mean, don't they believe that these medals will protect them? You ever hear that song, I don't care if it rains or freezes, as long as I have my plastic Jesus riding on the dashboard of my car?
no?
I heard that.
Jeez.
I heard that.
I'm sure there's superstitions like that. There's a lot of superstitious things.
Yeah, but the
And they do.
irony is, it's a holy witchcraft. I'm like, how is that even a thing?
Yeah, again, because
Well, if they think this is going to ward off evil,
it's superstition.
and it's a
Yeah, but
superstition.
Yeah, superstition is
we're
definitely not
combining
from God.
holy with witchcraft.
Witchcraft.
There's a
Well, to me,
conflict, like,
I don't
oh,
believe in the medals, but they do.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think they're wrong, but
Actually,
they
by him
don't.
calling it holy witchcraft, he's actually acknowledging that it's not holy. Because I'm sure they wouldn't
Right,
call it
right,
witchcraft.
thank you. She
Yeah,
can't
just
understand.
They
like
would
that's
they would call it
Doesn't
holy.
go together.
We would call it witchcraft.
Right,
So
so holy
we-
witchcraft.
That's his way of naming
Yeah.
the thing. They're treating it like holy, but it's a witchcraft. It's a superstition.
Right.
It's like if I saw a Roman Catholic, I said, "Well, what you're doing is very superstitious." They was like, "No, it's not.
Right.
I'm a believer," and I'd be like, "No, you're superstitious." Yeah, because from my viewpoint, from my perspective, you're superstitious.
Yeah.
Having to cross yourself somehow to ward off evil, whatever it is. I'm sure it has something to do with warding off evil. Sure.
I'm making
Yeah,
a play
I
on
got-
words.
I got-
He understands.
Yeah.
Nobody else does.
There you go. I understand exactly what you meant, because I know they wouldn't call it that.
Yeah.
They would not refer to it. But we'll have to look at that. That'd be our homework assignment, to look into that idea. Any other questions? All right, we're going to stop there, and next week we're going to pick up on verse 7 and continue our
There's
study.
another woman in the Bible later on in Revelation, isn't there? With stars or something? Isn't there another woman that the Catholics might?
Oh, no,
They
that-
think
Wait,
it's
verse
Mary.
7?
Isn't there another woman?
Yeah,
in there
verse 7.
somewhere?
We made up to verse 6a, so next time will be 6b to verse 14.
Okay.
Yeah, that's you're talking about chapter 12, where it's the woman who's protected by
Yeah,
God,
yeah, yeah.
and Roman Catholics see it as Mary,
Yeah.
and Protestants see it as referring to Israel. It's the Israel because that's where the Messiah comes
Right.
from. Who's definitely the child. They understand the child as being Jesus. And so they think Mary, it's Mary and Jesus, not Israel and Jesus.
Like my opinion is you want to believe the truth, you want to believe what you've been taught. You know,
Well, it's to
that's
seek
why
it.
I left. I
Well-
wanted the truth, not
Well,
to believe